So welcome to session number 3 of Civics 101 for the amazing Icy Stars Cycle 48, spring of 2021. I am your friendly instructor, Tom Tresser. We are on the subject of nonprofit organizations for social change in this cycle. We have introduced the concept to you, and we have gone over a little bit of the distinctions of what the heck is a nonprofit. Why is it different from government or a for-profit company? We've called your attention to the fact that you are now enjoying the fruits of a nonprofit organization by being an intern in Icy Stars. And I think we had a good conversation that people understand how that is benefiting them and where they fit into the thing that is Icy Stars. And now you are part of this amazing operation that's been going on for decades. We played, to welcome you into the session, Brian Stokes Mitchell singing "To Dream the Impossible Dream" from Man of La Mancha, because oftentimes nonprofits do the impossible. They do things that no one thought could be done, should be done, didn't want to do. And through the labors of the founders and operators of nonprofit organizations, impossible dreams are fulfilled in America every day. But before we jump into the new material, I'd just like to open the floor to any comments or questions from our first 2 sessions. You can throw it in a chat, or you can open your mic and just share any comments. I can't see this, you beautiful people, because I'm looking at my presentation. So if you're raising your hand or something, you're just going to have to jump in. Any questions or comments from discussions in our first 2 classes? Okay, hearing none, let's plow ahead. The question that we're looking at today is sustainability. How do we keep the lights on? How do we keep our nonprofits strong and going forward into the future so they can do the thing that they're doing? And so one way to just ask the question is, what keeps something going? So I ask you, we looked at the other 2 sectors of the society, the first being government, the second being the for-profit, the third sector being the nonprofit. So what keeps government going? Open your mic, throw it in the chat. What keeps government going?
Taxes.
Taxes. Yeah. So you could say that's the fuel, right? That keeps the government going. They also collect fees. So, when you go to the state to get a driver's license, you have to pay a fee, right? The state collects that money, and they put it towards the operation of that division. You buy a stamp, it's not a tax, but it's a fee. So yeah, taxes and fees also for government.
They probably make more money off penalties for you not following whatever directions they do actually on the item.
Say that again.
I said they probably make more money on the penalty for not having the proper items than they do on what they sell.
Oh, yeah, okay. Fair enough. Some people would say that we're taxed too much. And there's a debate in government and in civics over since there was government about is government too big, and therefore it costs too much money to operate? Or are we not spending enough, on certain things that are needed? So that is a huge debate, which we're not tackling in this class. But yes, so I would say what keeps government going would be, in terms of the money side, would be taxes. But is there anything else that keeps government going besides the taxes to pay for stuff?
The citizens, like voting and all those things.
Yeah, voting, Constitution. So you could say there is sort of an operating system, if you want to look at it that way, that permits the government to even be in the first place and allows it to collect taxes. And so that's the consent of the governed, the body politic, which is represented in our foundational documents, such as the Constitution. So basically, if you want to know, can a government do a thing? You got to look in the Constitution, you know, for the federal government or the state government. And of course, each state has its own constitution, which would be, you know, a guiding principles for that particular state. Okay, so I think you guys got that right. Oh, and government workers, Daryl put in. Yeah, right. Those are the folks that get the job done, and they got to come from somewhere. So this is good. Now let's shift focus to what keeps the for-profit sector going.
Consumers.
I didn't hear that.
Consumers.
The consumer, yeah, which is the shorthand for saying buying stuff, right? So a company is selling something, whatever it is, a service, a product, and as long as people are buying that thing and the revenues are more than costs of making the thing, then that for-profit enterprise can keep going. It could lose money for a while or even for a long while, as long as it has investors or other sources of revenue. So you might also say, aside from the consumer, there is also the investor. So the investor is putting money in to the business with the expectation of profits and good returns coming later. All right, now let's think about our third sector. So you get a good sense of what's keeping the government and the for-profit businesses going. So let's go back to our concept of the mission. In order to satisfactorily answer the question, what keeps a nonprofit going, we have to remind ourselves that the nonprofit exists to serve a mission. Serve, big word, serve, service. We discussed servant leadership at the end of last class. This idea of delivering a service, a needed service, responding to a situation or opportunity that has not been addressed. That's the whole idea. If it was being addressed, we wouldn't need it. I guess you could say, if there had been a pipeline of black and brown people going into the tech sector, IC Stars wouldn't have been necessary, but it was necessary. It remains necessary. So there's something that's going on in the society in the first two sectors that is off, wrong, unadjusted, just something has fallen short. And so nonprofits serve constituents who have been unserved by the first two sectors. And it's the mission which provides the meaning and the direction for a nonprofit organization, as well as the uniqueness, or sometimes you say the niche of that organization. So you can think about IC Stars again, and what makes it unique. Can you think of other groups like it in Chicago? You'll have to puzzle on that one for a while, and you may have to do a Google search to see who is training who for what. And is IC Stars in a crowded space with many, many such organizations, or is it somewhat unique? I'll leave that one to you to look into. But let's just say this mission thing is sort of the fuel or the operating system, if you will, for the nonprofit organization. So now let's talk about nonprofits and money, because you got to talk about the Benjamins. So first of all, nonprofits pay no state or federal income taxes. That's part of the deal for being a nonprofit organization. When you file your papers with the Internal Revenue Service, as IC Stars has done, the IRS says, This is a good thing. We recognize IC Stars as a special being. It is not a business. It's not a unit of local government. It's a member of this thing called the nonprofit sector. And as they do their business and collect revenue and have spending and go about their mission, they are exempt. They do not have to pay federal income tax. Whereas Tom Tresser's Pizzeria starts on the same day as IC Stars back in 1998. Now I have 5 pizzerias. I have revenues of $3 million. Tom Tresser's Pizzeria, it's not a nonprofit, and I must pay my taxes. Nonprofits may be exempt from paying sales tax, depending on the state you're in. In Illinois, if you file your paperwork with the state, they will issue you a certificate. And then when you buy anything, office supplies or furniture or software equipment or whatever, you show that certificate to the store and you do not pay sales tax. If the nonprofit owns property, they pay no property tax. Again, a big deal. So you can think of, I don't know, a large church or university, or say the YMCA or other groups that have lots of stuff. Think of their property tax bills would be enormous and perhaps possibly prohibitive. But because they've been granted this special status by the federal government, the state says you don't have to pay property taxes. However, if you have folk working for you, you must pay their payroll taxes and pay your fair share into the federal system. That is a must. So you don't get to skate on that. Now, also, if you donate money to a nonprofit, you may be able to deduct some part of that gift from your own owed federal income tax. That again is a very unique provision in the law. So every year, Mr. and Mrs. Tresser add up their donations, which usually total to be between 4 and 7% of our total income. And we give it to our accountant. And most years, until the law was changed recently, we could enjoy a deduction on our federal income taxes. And if a nonprofit takes in more money than it spends, we don't really call that profit. Again, it sounds like we're in the weeds with these terms, but it's a crucial distinction. The excess funds that a nonprofit may bring in excess of its operating costs must be used to circulate back into the organization to keep the organization strong. It could be saved up, like in a special savings account, or it could be used to improve programming, maybe hire a new staff person, things of this nature. But what it can't do is to just go and pay Sandy and the senior managers just a bunch of money like as a bonus. Now, they may have bonus provisions in their contracts that are tied to their performance. But the distribution of funds in a nonprofit is not like a for-profit where there's shareholders. We mentioned last time that there really is nobody who owns the nonprofit in a strange sense. The community really is the owner of the nonprofit. Okay, so those are a few points about money. So you're getting a sense of how money flows, into the nonprofit. Now, this is how money flows into this nonprofit, IC Stars. I'm sharing with you now a page from the IC Stars 990. Now, this is a form that all nonprofits have to file with the IRS. Now, I said they didn't have to pay taxes, but they still have to report. The IRS wants to know how our nonprofits are doing, and it's put into a giant database where people like me can grab it. Researchers use these for study, also for accountability. It's part of being open. It's part of the bond that the nonprofit has with the public. You can't keep these records secret. So if this was Tom Tresser's Pizza Company, it was all mine, I don't have to share this with you. You may not know what my operating costs are. You may not know what my salary is. You may not know what my profits are. That's my business. But in the world of nonprofits that are filing these documents, you can look. All right, so let's see. What does this document reveal for 2018? Well, first glance, IC Stars is doing pretty good. They had a downtick somewhat in revenues from the 2008, 17 and 18 in some categories, but overall they're looking pretty robust. So if you see line 12, total revenue for 2018 is $3 million. And that is a very good number for a mature nonprofit. That says this nonprofit has been around for a while, and of course it has. It says that they're doing a very good job on the professional side in terms of their revenue streams, that they're managing themselves properly and in a robust and responsible manner. And they're sort of being rewarded, if you want to think about it this way, for the good work that they've done. So I will reformulate this table for you in another way. What you really want to look at in nonprofits are two categories of income. One is called unearned income, and the other is earned income. And here's the distinction. Unearned income is from love, basically. Folks are giving you money because they love you and your mission. And it could be from individuals, could be from foundations, grants, that sort of thing, or fundraisers. You know that IC Stars has an annual event every year that's, it's on the high side. I think it was like $250 or something like that for a ticket. And it's designed to raise a big chunk of money in one night and to celebrate the year, also to recognize people, in the organization and people who help the organization. It's a big fun event, and hope someday you all will be joining as alumni to the annual gala. But if you add up all those sources, you get about $2.3 million. But then if you add, and so that's the amount of money, I guess you could say, that people have given through love. Now, if you look at earned income, it's $719,000. This is from services they render. This could be consulting. This could be speaking fees. This could be selling curriculum materials. So say IC Stars has like a workbook on how to train people in technology and how to have what's a geek week? How could someone who wants to train people take this thing called Geek Week and adapt it? So they may have a manual which they sell. People will pay them essentially to share their knowledge. When you add a modest amount of money from investments, you get a total income of $725,000. So you put those two numbers together, and you have the total income for this particular year, a little over $3 million. Now, as you see, the bulk of this money, I don't know, 80% or more, is from the love category. That is to say, people are giving money to IC Stars. And so that raises the question of why? Why donate? And so again, let's open up the mic here. People jump in the chat, please. I'd like to know if anybody on the line, anybody in Cycle 48 has donated to any cause or organization.
Yeah, I donate to my church.
Yes.
As well as I've donated to United Way.
Okay. Why do you donate to your church?
Well, I attend my church and I know that the doors, to open the doors, we have to pay the light bill. There, if I want heat, we need gas. I like to use the bathroom there. We have to flush the toilet. So,
That's right.
I know that the doors you have to give money for the doors to stay open.
Now that sounds like a simple observation, but believe me, many, many people use nonprofits every day without that sense of understanding that we got to pay the bills or the lights will be turned off. Every time they plug in the organ for a service, they're consuming electricity, and that adds up. Not to mention, of course, the pastoral staff. But so that's a very practical reason to keep something going that you like. Why else do you give to the church in United Way?
About a cause.
Say again?
I said because you care about a cause.
Because you care. Yeah. And that caring translates into what? translates into action, right? So I think you know that I believe that democracy and civics is a full-on contact sport. It's not something you can do sitting in your chair. And this is an example of turning a private sentiment into a public act. So keeping something private needs to be public in our work. And in this case, the fact that you care about something, which is certainly notable and laudable, that you care about that church or you care about the work of the United Way. But what happens if it's all you do? I really like those guys. And that's all you do. What happens?
Nothing.
Nothing from nothing. Right. So it sounds, again, very simple, but it's a very profound fact that that you decided to translate your concern, your private concern, into public action by donating money from your purse, from your household goods. That's less money you have for your kids, for your family, to go to dinner or whatever, go to Disney World, whatever it is that you want to do. And you're going to say to yourself, I will get by just fine. I'm not going to miss in the big picture this amount of money that I'm going to give to that church, and in fact, I'm going to get something back from it that's probably very, very valuable.
Tax write-off.
Say what?
The tax write-off.
A tax write-off. If you choose to. I mean, most people actually don't keep track of this stuff, and they give. Who else donates?
Foundations?
Okay. And what do you donate to?
Oh, can you repeat that, please?
Do you give money? Do you donate money to any organization or cause?
Yeah,
To who? To what?
Erie House.
Put it in the chat, could you please?
Okay.
Again, why do we give money? Why do you donate?
For self-satisfaction.
For what now? Satisfaction?
Yeah, self-satisfaction. Yes.
Yeah, I gotta bet my sound is not great here today. Yeah, so Erie House, thank you. Oh, excellent. So I think we could keep this conversation going for a while, but I think you get the picture a little bit as people are reflecting on why they donate. Please keep putting it in the chat. What organization you donate to and why. Be as specific as you can. It could be that you benefited from their services. That's a very good reason to donate, and it's often a very powerful reason. As I mentioned before, once you graduate from IC Stars, you're going to be an alumni, and guess what? You're going to get a message from the fundraising department saying, hey, could you please share the joy and donate to IC Stars? So if you benefited from a nonprofit, that's a reason to donate. Okay. It's easy to donate in some places, right? That's also a truism. So if the organization has a good website and has a good email program, and not only is their message sound, but their technology is sound to make it convenient for you to donate, that is also very helpful. Rainbow Push, yeah, huge organization. So people donate, again, to civic organizations, to religious institutions, education, cultural, and you could say training and technical organizations are in the mix here. But here's how I think about it when I wonder about donations. What the literature tells us is that people donate on account of several factors. First is the reputation of the organization. So you get an inquiry from an organization you never heard of, and it's like, what the hell is who's these guys? You know, you get a physical letter or an email, you never heard of them. You're not going to give them anything. And that's tied to the excellence of the programming that this organization is offering. And also, what evidence do they offer? So it's one thing for me, Tom Tresser, to say, hey, Tom Tresser's educational institution is amazing. I tell you that it's amazing. Please give me $50. It's like, you're going to say, I never heard of you. According to what? Well, if I show you an article in the Chicago Tribune where somebody had come to one of my classes or talked to some students and said the Tom Tresser Educational Institution is 100% effective in training young people to take technical jobs. And here's testimony from Stan Smith or Sally Smith, that sort of thing. You get this picture, you're hearing the story of the organization through various channels. And that's actually a very important role inside the nonprofit. They cannot sit on their hat. They have to tell their story aggressively, creatively, and ongoingly across multiple channels and platforms. That is just part of the deal. And so when you, the consumer or the citizen, hears through these channels about Tom Tresser's educational institution, it sticks in your mind a little bit. And so when I send you that letter or email, or perhaps meet you at a fundraiser or some other space, you go, oh yeah, okay, I heard of you guys. Now, whether that's enough to make the sale, that's another story. But without some kind of knowledge or recognition of our effectiveness, our efficacy, you're not going to give me any money. And then it leads to this idea of consistent creative communication. So again, you can't keep this work to yourself. That's simply not going to fly. And if you think about IC Stars, and if you could ask the director of communications, like, well, how many channels do they employ? I'm sure you can think about a few. So if you want to put it into chat, IC Stars public channels, what are they? Just put them in the chat. And somebody's managing all that, right? Somebody is affirmatively curating IC Stars communication channels equals what? Website, Facebook, Instagram, email newsletter, right? They do all those things. Sometimes there's also a physical, like a physical paper newsletter. I do not believe IC Stars produces one of those, but they have on occasion produced hard documents, like little booklets, those kinds of things that might be given out at a fundraiser, sort of annual. Oh, Twitter, don't forget Twitter, absolutely. So there could be physical publications that live online as PDFs, but are at some point physically passed out or distributed. And finally, and not to be discounted by any means, is personal connections. So we are more likely to support something in terms of giving money or time or other kinds of aid when we have a personal connection to the asking organization. So it could be a friend of mine, friend of yours, a family member, a colleague, someone who you trust says, hey, Tom, do you know about IC Stars? No. Dude, they're awesome. I know that you're interested in technology and justice and equity. And so I think you should know about these guys. So here's their website, check it out. So someone who's not on the staff necessarily thinks so much of the organization that they're kind of boasting about it. They're like evangelicals. That is a critical part of the nonprofit ecosystem. Having people in your corner who love you so much that without pay, they help market you. They help send the message. People are very likely to respond to that sort of connection. That people will trust that information is worthy because of the fact that there is no skin in the game. The only reason why someone told me that IC Stars was great simply because Icy Stars is great, and they know that I'm interested in it. There's no one's getting a commission. You know what I mean? So I'm saying, whoa, you cared so much about that you went out of your way to tell me to send me an email with a link. That took time on your heart. I'm impressed. I'm going to check that link out. And so when you think about your own powers and your own networks, when you talk up Icy Stars, as I know you will and do, you're helping the organization tremendously. Okay, so that's the reason, some of the reasons why people donate. Now that leads us to our discussion that we're doing today about the board of directors. So when we're talking about what keeps a nonprofit going, one of the big answers is this thing called the board of directors. These are human beings who are kind of the legal stewards of the nonprofit. Every nonprofit must have them, and at least 3 in the state of Illinois. And what does this board of directors do? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in some detail now. So first of all, the board members are the legal stewards of the nonprofit. As I said before, no one really owns the Icy Stars, or no one really owns a nonprofit, but the board stands in as stewards, if you will, on behalf of the community to keep everything straight and correct. They hire and evaluate the CEO. That's one of their major jobs. And in this case, even though Sandy Kessler was a co-founder of Icy Stars so many years ago, she is responsible to her board of directors to keep the organization strong and on track. And if for some reason she messes up, she could be fired. It's as crazy as that might sound. So she is beholden to the board. She keeps them informed and they keep her in check, and they work together to keep the organization moving forward. Now, the board also oversees the overall planning and acts as a North Star to make sure that Icy Stars or the other organization stays true to its mission. So there could be a planning committee of the board, and they could be doing an annual or semi-annual retreat, or even a major strategic planning initiative. And that certainly could involve staff members as well and other stakeholders, but it's driven by the board. And basically they're saying, like, how are we doing? Are we responding well to the changing times? You know, we're doing good now in 2021, but what's going on in 2023? We better, look ahead. So remember, we talked about servant leadership. One of the features was foresight, seeing into the future. Well, this is where this comes into play. The board of directors has to make sure that our organization is doing well today, firing on all cylinders, but also is kind of keeping its eye on the future. Ooh, how do we do that? Well, that's for another class. The board also ensures that what the organization is doing is of high quality. So there's usually some kind of evaluation process, checking in, looking at various reports to make sure that what the organization is doing is of high quality and consistent. The board also ensures that the nonprofit has the resources it needs to do its job, and that includes money and materials. So, do you have a good space, a place where you are? I know you guys have not, I don't think, been actually to Icy Stars headquarters since we're all doing this virtually, but Icy Stars does maintain a physical office, where people go and work. And I know there's we're going to come back out of COVID, and perhaps maybe before the cycle is over, you could go visit the space. But I mean, physical space is part of it, but also the money, the actual money that we need to pay our staff, and for your stipends. You guys are being paid, are you not? And so that's a big ticket number, as you saw from the financial report I shared with you a few minutes ago. And so the board is not actually writing the grants, but they're making sure that there's a process in place for all the revenue sources that we mentioned, that grants are being written, that there is an annual gala, that where appropriate, IC Stars is charging fees for services that are commensurate with its expertise. So these are things that the board is going to check up on. And they ensure compliance with rules and regulations. So a nonprofit does have to file certain paperwork with different units of government. I mentioned one of them was the 990. The board makes sure that that paperwork is filed in a timely manner. And that's part of their oversight. And they promote the organization to larger domains and communities. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Our board members come from many different places and spaces, and they kind of serve as ambassadors. You know, they love the organization to pieces, and they're going to brag on it all the time in many places, you know, that they travel to. And we want that. We crave that. We desire that. It's a very good thing when our board members are proud of their service and are happy and able to talk about the nonprofit in a very learned, fun way, in an engaging way. And that's actually part of the training that board members go through. If we had more time, we could do a whole workshop on strategic planning and board development. All right, so let's look at these board members a little more closely. How do we select them? Well, we select them across several domains. One is the domain of expertise and their leadership. So if we're going to look at IC Stars board in a minute, and would you be surprised to find people on the board who are like technology gurus, people who have done significant work in the tech sector. They either are startup people, or maybe they're working in a startup, or they have some technical background. They could be engineers, for example, or coders, or people with those kinds of skills. And they will be very accomplished in those domains and have deep networks. And that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, for your nonprofit, for someone on your board to be deeply connected into that space. So if you're a school or if you're education, you know, you want people from the education world. If this was an environmental organization, you might have someone on the board who was an environmental scientist, or even elected official, or someone who knows a lot about parks or gardening, that sort of thing. Also, you are on the board because you're wealthy, and you know a lot of people, and you're freely giving of your wealth to the organization, and you're tapping those connections freely on behalf of the organization. And that is actually a requirement. In order to be on a board, you are required to make contributions to the organization and to help keep their coffers filled. And then finally, a selection process might be, do you represent a certain community or certain location or certain set of life experiences? So is there diversity of life experiences on the board? So for example, there may be someone on the board who is a recent graduate of the program. So there could be an alumnus, and that's a board slot that could be filled, on some annual or semi-annual basis. There could be someone on the board from the South Side, or a part of the city, for example, where there's not a lot of technology opportunities. So they take someone, and it could be like a pastor or a civic leader of some sort, to say, we really want the views of, say, the South Side, Black Side, South Side of Chicago, to be represented in the deliberations of IC Stars. And so they could say that, they could make that a requirement. We'd like to have someone from the Englewood community or what have you. Okay, so those are some of the screens.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
My question is to you, sir. If I want to start my own nonprofit organization, but I don't have no one to be my board members, is there an organization or our nonprofit organization that can help me, give me a list of individuals that wants to be a board directors?
Good point. Put that into the chat. Ask that question to the chat, and I'll look that up, and I'll send out the answer in our follow-up email.
Thank you.
Put it into the chat so I won't forget. But there are organizations. Short answer is yes. there are organizations that help the sort of the young nonprofit get started before it's even a nonprofit, to sort of get their paperwork filed and to act as a fiscal agent for you before you're actually approved by the IRS. Sometimes the process can take 6 months to a year. In the meanwhile, you want to be able to accept donations. And so there's a thing called a fiscal agent that acts on your behalf after you've done a little bit of organization. But please put the question in the chat. Okay. And what we say about the board of directors is they're unpaid jobs. Unlike the for-profit sector, where a person can make a lot of money serving on the board of a corporation, our colleagues who serve on the nonprofit boards are unpaid. There's usually monthly or certainly quarterly meetings where they're required to attend and do the business of the organization. There's also committee work. So we'll hear about that in a minute. What is the work that happens in these committees as the board does its business? They're bringing their expertise and their experience to the governing of the organization. So someone who has worked for a large corporation in the tech sector is going to be telling Sandy and the other people on the organization, look, my organization has 3,000 people, in our tech department, and they need to learn how to, whatever. And so make sure that as you're training your people, they know how to do this thing called whatever. That's valuable information to the program, so that they stay in line with the needs and changing situation out there in the real world, so to speak. Someone is brought in to train you guys how to code apps, and this person does that for a living. So they're bringing that to you, saying, like, this is what I do every day. I get paid very good money for teaching and training and building apps for my clients. Now I'm going to teach you, right? That's a little bit of what we're talking about. The annual financial commitment. That's also true for our board of directors. And we often say in the crude parlance of nonprofit management is you get it, you give it, or you get off. So there could be an annual contribution, say, of $1,000. I don't know if this is true, of IC Stars. And if I'm Tom Trusser, a board member, and I think $1,000 is a little too steep, I could give them maybe 500. I'm expected to go out and raise the other 500. So maybe I'll sell a bunch of tickets to the annual gala, or maybe I'll get my friend Joe and Sam, they'll each to give 250. But my commitment to the organization has to be fulfilled within that year, or I could be asked to leave if I'm not doing my job. And then they show up, they help, they mentor. So this is a little more informal. People at the staff level might be calling board members informally for advice, on different matters of policy and practice. And they serve as in this way. It's very important to show leadership in this way. And maybe some of the board members have already visited IC Stars via Tees and other ways of connecting, and you might have met some already. And you'll know that these people are deeply engaged in the work of what you are doing and experiencing, and they're there for you. And part of the deal of being in a group like IC Stars is you're expected and allowed to network. And I think it used to be that you all had business cards made up. I don't know if you're still doing that. Are you still doing business cards? No? No? Well, I would say do your own biz cards. So if anybody's a graphic whiz inside this cycle, maybe you guys can get together and do business cards. Of course, it's not like we're meeting in physical space where you could approach a speaker and give them your card, but it's a good idea to have them. Anyhow, these are some of the features of our boards. And then let's take a look at some of the leadership positions. In our board, we have typically a chair of the board, and then there's a vice chair, a secretary, and a treasurer. So this little chart right here explains their roles, sort of like a little job description. And the chairperson of the board is really quite a big deal. It's a big deal enough to be a member of a significant organization like IC Stars, but it's quite another thing to be the chair of the board. That's another layer of leadership responsibilities that you must answer for. And as you can see, there's quite a lot there, bullet points, driving the board forward, making sure that new members come on as old members cycle off. And so forth. So there could be other leadership roles like chairs of committees, like there could be a membership committee, there could be a fundraising committee, there could be a programming committee, and they all have their jobs to do. But these are the four main ones. Now, when we talk about board members, the law and practice dictates three core duties of the board. What is called the duty of care. And this means that board members should fulfill their roles to the best of their abilities, proactively participating in communicating, proactive. So this is not a passive thing. This is active, ongoing, skin in the game kind of thing. So your duty of care is expressed that way. The duty of loyalty. All activities should be done in the best interest of the organization, not in the best interest of the board members. So this again is a distinction between our friends in the for-profit sector, where you might be on a board and you're holding stock and you definitely have skin in the game. That company makes money, you make money. There's no such thing going on here. It's like I say, there is no stock in IC Stars. And we also don't want, say, Tom Tresser, board member, who also has the Tom Tresser computer company, for IC Stars to give Tom Tresser the contract to buy the computers. That's a conflict of interest, and we wouldn't. Now, I could give my computers. I could say, here, IC Stars, here's like 15 new spanking computers. I'm just going to give them to you. That's a different matter. I might get a letter of thanks that I could then sort of use, I suppose, to advertise, Tom Tresser, supplier of computers to IC Stars. That's okay. But it's another matter if there's a kind of an insider deal. So the duty of loyalty forbids that sort of insider trading. Then the duty of obedience. The board should follow organizational rules as defined in the governance document. So there's rules, there's bylaws and other rules that could be in place for how money is spent, for example. All organizations that have significant resources have what's known as a chart of accounts, that when money comes in or money goes out, they're posted to this chart of accounts. These are kind of everyday good operation practices that you're sort of looking for as a board member. And if they're not there, then it's your job to make sure that these deficits are corrected. And our nonprofit is operating above board and with excellent operating practices. So with that, it's time to pivot and welcome our special guest. So I mentioned board of directors. This is IC Stars National Board of Directors. So these individuals right here in front of you have a very big responsibility for the overall operation of IC Stars, which is now not just a Chicago thing, but in other cities. So it's a sort of a national operation, whereas before it was just concentrated right here in Chicago. So now, as the organization has evolved in this manner, it has formed something called a national board. And with us this afternoon is Dave Edelstein, the chair of the National Board of IC Stars. Dave is the affiliate professor at the College of Engineering and Computer Science at Syracuse University. He was, for many years, the vice president of supply chain management at Simmons Healthcare Diagnostics. He's a member of the board of directors of Purple Sun, which is a medical tech startup based in New York. And he's also a member and vice chair of the board of directors of Syracuse University. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Hi,
Happy to be here.
Dave.
So could you start, please, by just telling us your story? Tell us a little bit about yourself and you know what you do in the world.
Sure. Um, let's see. So I grew up in New Jersey, and I'm the first member of my family to go to college.
Hmm.
My dad had a small business selling office furniture. My mom stayed at home, and my guidance counselor looked at my SAT scores and my grades and gave me a list of schools he thought I might want to look at. And when I was a senior in, must have been a senior in high school, some friends of mine and I took a road trip, and we visited colleges we were each interested in. And Syracuse University was on my list. And we got there. It was a beautiful sunny day, warm. Everybody was out on the quad having a great time. And I figured, well, my guidance counselor said this was a good place to go. And it sure looks like a nice place to go. So I decided to go there. Of course, I didn't know that that was the only nice day in the spring. The weather's pretty lousy in Syracuse. Anyway, I went to Syracuse. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I took a class in computer programming, and I fell in love with that. So I decided to pursue a degree in computer science, which I did. And my first job was at IBM, programming computers. And then my dad always wanted me to come work for him. So I went to work for him for about a year, and selling office furniture really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I sat down with my dad and I said, you know, I love you, and you got a great business here and stuff, but this isn't for me. So I went to work for Bristol Myers in Manhattan. And my dad was okay with that, although for about 5 years kept asking me when I'm going to come back. And as I got more successful in the corporate world, I think he felt like I made the right choice. So I worked at Bristol Myers in Manhattan, and then I wanted to work at a division of Bristol Myers where the products were being made. And they sent me to a division in northern Indiana that makes knees and hips. A company called, it's now its own company called Zimmer. And I worked there for a while. I lived in South Bend because my in-laws lived in Evanston, and South Bend was closer to Evanston than anywhere else that we thought we could live. And then after a while, decided there was a big project back at headquarters in Bristol Myers. Bristol Myers merged with Squibb, and we were changing how everything worked. And they asked me to come back and run a big project there, which I did. And then, so we were living in New Jersey again, and my wife wanted to get back to Evanston, and I felt like it was time for a change for me. So I got a job at a small company in Deerfield, Illinois, called Dade Bearing. And Dade Bearing was, we made medical diagnostic equipment, blood testing equipment. And I was their first CIO. And over time, I picked up other executive responsibilities, regulatory affairs and health and safety and travel and a few other things. And after a while, we went through a bankruptcy because we were built through debt by a private equity company. And we went through a bankruptcy, came out as a public company. And in 2007, we were acquired by a very, very big company called Siemens. Most of you may know about General Electric. Siemens is the German General Electric, if you want to think about that. And they had a healthcare company, and they wanted to include medical diagnostics. So they bought us. And in 2012, I turned 55 and decided I had enough of the corporate world. So I left Siemens, and I've been doing board stuff ever since. I have to say I did very well when Siemens bought Dade Bearing. I made a lot of money, so it was easy for me to retire at 55. What else can I tell you about myself? I have two sons. My older son lives in Syracuse, and he's got three kids. My 3 grandchildren live there. And my younger son lives in Chicago. He's a lawyer, and he and his wife live in Chicago. I don't remember the name of the
Awesome.
name of the area, but he's down in Chicago someplace.
Thank you for sharing that journey, Dave. So at some point you encounter, I'm imagining, Sandy Kestrel.
Yes, right.
So
So
how
in
did
about
that?
2000, yeah, go ahead, Tom. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so how, let's go back in time, and if you wouldn't mind recounting that moment where you first met her.
Sure. So I think it was around 2005. I was always looking for really talented people to join my organization. This was still it was still Dade bearing at the time. I had, well, I don't know, maybe a couple of hundred IT people working for me around the world, and had a good number working for me up in Deerfield. And I was always looking for talented people. And I was also looking for a diverse set of people, diverse in terms of experience, diverse in terms of race and background. And somebody told me about IC Stars. And they said, what I should do is go to a T. And I said, what does that mean? What does a T mean? So they told me what it was about. And I came down, this was at IC Stars' original location, a little north of where IC Stars is now. And I came in and had a tea, and it was incredible. It was one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever had in my life. The cohort, just like you, were smart and engaged and energetic and curious, and it was great. And I met there was a guy that worked for Sandy named Eric Lenert. Eric was kind of the chief operating officer at the time. And I had a good time getting to know him. And then I met Sandy. And I'm sure you know, Sandy is a very, very special person. And she just, really, really caught my imagination. So I started donating money to IC Stars, both personally and through my company. I hired people from IC Stars. And sometime not long after that, Sandy asked me to be on the board. And that's when I started my work as a board member for IC Stars.
Okay, so this is amazing. So you accept, so let's just review. Somebody told you about this, right?
Yeah.
That bears out my statement I just made 10 minutes ago. Somebody took it on themselves to see you and knowing IC Stars, and said, I'm going to make a match here.
That's correct.
And I think
correct.
that went by so fast. I think it just needs to be lifted up. That's part of the ecosystem. That's part of the art and science of this work. Whoever that was gets a big medal, gets a big hug, as it were, for doing that service to the organization. You didn't have to listen, right? You could have been busy. You could have said, yeah, thanks a lot, Joe, but I'm going to Italy for my 80th anniversary or something. It could have been a million things on your plate, but you said, oh, okay, I'll check it out. So that is worth holding up. And then you said you went to the organization. That was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. Can you explore? Can you go back in time and say what was happening? Why do you remember it so fondly?
Well, it was a tea. It's unique. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that. Normally when you go learn about an organization, you meet the executive director, you get some song and dance about what the organization does. Maybe you get to walk around and see the organization. But even when you're walking around, you don't get to really talk to anybody or get to know anybody. And so here's this opportunity to spend an hour or an hour and a half with the cohort, with the actual people who are benefiting from the organization. And like I say, so I spent, you've all been to teas, I spent my 10 or 15 minutes telling a story about myself, and then I get all these questions. And it was great. I mean, and the questions were really thoughtful and really trying to understand how I got to where I am. And, here I am, I'm different than everybody, right? I mean, I'm an old white guy, and not everybody around the table are old white guys. And, you know, we're having a good discussion about what life is like in information technology, what life is like in a corporation. And it was really powerful for me, and I hope powerful for the cohort. You know, I really left there feeling like this was unique. This was really a special place, and I wanted to be part of it.
And let's just hold that up for a second, because at this point in your career, you've been around the world, you've done many projects, met many people in technology and education. I mean, this is not your first rodeo in terms of experiencing a nonprofit. So let's just hold on to that for a second about how unique that experience must have been. As you say, you've been to many organizations, you've taken tours, you know, been introduced to all kinds of organizations in many formats. So kudos to IC Stars and their leaders for creating the space for a thing called the T. Again, it sounds simple to say, but look at the profound impact this practice is having on the organization. And then the exchange that you talked about, the back and forth, you know, with the interns, they were giving you some good, robust conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what that does is it says to me, as somebody who might want to get involved and who might want to give money and give time to the organization, I'm talking to the people who are getting the benefit here. So, and it was such a great experience, and that the interns at that time were so powerful that I felt like, yeah, you know, if I'm going to give of myself to get involved with IC Stars, this is going to be good. It's going to be really good. You know, you see, I'm a member of the board of we call them the board of trustees at Syracuse University. The best experiences I have as a board member at Syracuse is meeting with the students. You know, really getting to know, spending some time with all with the students that I'm able to interact with, where they came from, why they came to Syracuse, what are they studying, what do they hope they're going to do. It makes me feel good. It's like, yeah, it's good. I'm just giving my time to the university. I'm giving my money to the university. I'm making connections on behalf of the university. And here are the students that are, you know, getting an education there and hopefully going to be successful themselves. So it's a really, you know, so I think the T is really very important. And I know in talking to other people who've gone to T, they feel the same way. You know, it's like they leave the T. It's like, how do I get involved? How do I help out here?
And so it's important to notice it takes two to tango. That IC Stars was thoughtful in setting up the T's. You know, they've got staff, they built it into the schedule. It's a cultural thing, so people understand what it is. They look forward to it. They get good at doing it. But the other side is you as the TE or the T invitee is like, yeah, I'm up for this. This is fun. This is good. I will partake. I will slurp the cup of tea that has been offered to me. And it's received gratefully and with enthusiasm. So it's a two-way street. And we see this also as part of the art and science of nonprofits, that IC Stars has set up a culture and a mechanism, if you will, a piece of infrastructure that is unique to them, of which people like Dave and other colleagues can partake at their desire. And then they take of it for what they will. They don't have to love it. They don't have to, you know, do anything, except it's so cool, it's so engaging that it starts a nice feedback loop. And that is a beautiful thing. So now that we understand a little bit about, you know, how this dance got started, Dave, what exactly does a board do? How do you think of your work inside the board?
So yeah, I think actually the slide you had, Tom, did a nice job of some of the major things. The board's job is to oversee what the organization is doing. So we set policy, or we review policy, and then set it. We make sure that, sometimes Sandy will come up with an idea. I want to go do this. And it's the board's job to say, does that make sense to do? Is it part of the mission of IC Stars? Does it add value to the interns? Do we have the resources? Can we do it now? And so we kind of ask all of those kind of questions. We make sure that the money is well spent. We have an annual audit. An outside firm comes in and looks at how we're spending our money and are we doing it correctly? And it's our job as the board to review that audit and make sure that management's behaving in the right way. Sometimes we're cheerleaders saying, yeah, you're doing a great job. I know as we've gone through COVID, this has been really challenging, and part of our job as a board is to say to Sandy and the staff, you're doing a great job. We're going to make it through. You're resilient. We're going to make it. And I think, that's helpful. Sometimes we have to put on the brakes. That we're trying to expand to other cities. Well, when we first started expanding, I think we went a little bit too fast, and we ran into some trouble. Trouble is probably too strong a word, but things didn't go the way we wanted them to go. So we had to stop and say, let's wait. Let's make sure we have the right resources in place, make sure we have enough time. One of the issues about expanding is everybody wants Sandy. And Sandy can't be everywhere all the time. So how do we make sure that we're, helping Sandy manage her time in a way that she can go and talk to people in Milwaukee or Columbus or Kansas City or wherever she's going, and worry about Chicago and worry about how the overall organization is working. So we have to have some give and take about that. And I'll also say that on the IC Stars board, we think about, we say the 3 Ds. What's our role? It's a 3 Ds. We can be a donor, that is, we can give money. We can be a doer, that means we can volunteer and do work. Or we can be a door opener, that means making connection to other people. And we'd like every board member to do all 3, but not everybody does all 3. I do 2 of them. I'm a donor and I'm a doer. I'm not much of a door opener. I've been retired for a long time. I live up here in Michigan, far away from Chicago and Milwaukee. So I don't have much door opening that I can do. But we try to do that. And we make it clear to prospective board members that we'd like you to do 1, 2, or all 3 of those things. And it kind of works out well that way.
So we understand pretty obviously the idea of giving money. You write a check and you transfer resources from your personal bank account, your family's bank account to IC Stars. That's pretty plain. But there's other thing about your expertise and the sort of committee work. Can you help us understand a little bit about how a board member might move through like a month or something with
Sure.
that kind of responsibility?
Sure. So IC Stars has 5 or 6 committees. There's a finance committee that looks, obviously at finance. There's kind of a marketing committee. How do we get the word out about IC Stars? There's an expansion committee. That's the one where we look at moving to other cities. There's a development committee. How do we get more money? Who do we go to ask money of? So, and there may be 1 or 2 other committees that I'm forgetting right now. So what we try to do is we say to volunteers, we find somebody, and they did this, IC Stars did this with me. We'd like you to come. I make an expression of interest. Hey, Sandy, I'd like to get involved. And then Sandy talks to me and learns about me. What are my areas of interest? And what committee might be of interest to me? And then she'll ask me to be on that committee. And I'm not yet a board member. I'm on the committee. And the committee meets 6, 7 times a year. There's a chair of the committee who's probably on the board. There's a staff member who's working with the committee. Somebody who works for Sandy is on the committee. And we meet and we try to do what this committee is supposed to do. Then the chair will go to a board meeting and report on what the committee has done. And then the board might come up with some idea, and that idea may go back to that committee, and the committee will work on that idea. So early on, I was on a committee. You know that one of the things you might do as an intern is you might go work as a contract programmer for somebody. And so we put together a business, I guess you'd call it, that places IC Stars interns into a contract programming position. So we created that business. So, that's something we did on our committee. The expansion committee that I was on, we thought about how would we expand? How would we go to another city? How would that work? How would we decide if a city is ready for us or would be successful with IC Stars? Who do we look for in a city? How do we get things set up? How do we raise money? And so we kind of did things like that. And then if you're a good volunteer and you like what you're doing and you're contributing of your time and people like what you're doing, you might be asked to be on the board. And then if you're asked to be on the board, expectations are laid out for you, how much money you're expected to raise, how often you're going to meet, what it means to be on the board. And then, you come onto the board and if you're really interested, you can move up to be one of the officers of the board, or like me, being the chair of the board.
And so can you say a little bit about the differences or the sort of maybe the extra leadership burdens of being the chair of this board? Because you're sort of first among equals or something there.
Yeah, right. So I work with Sandy a lot, and we work on, what do we want to talk about at the board? So we work together on the agenda, and I review the presentation that Sandy and her staff are going to make at the board. I give Sandy her performance review. So, I talk to my board members about how do you think Sandy did this year? But I'm the one who actually sits down with her and says, you did great here. You could do some work. You could maybe do a little bit better over there. So do that. I interview people. If, we're going to hire somebody else on Sandy's staff, I'm one of the people who interviews that person or those people. I will interview prospective board members. And then there are times when we're having debates at the board, and sometimes I have to stop the debate and help guide the direction of the board. I'll give you an example. Sometimes when IC Stars runs into some difficulties, like how are we going to deal with COVID, there are some of my colleagues on the board who will say, let's not expand. Let's stop expansion because we need to focus on COVID. And I say, no, we can do both. We can focus on COVID and we can continue our expansion. And so sometimes I have to step in and do something like that. So I try not to pull rank, I'm just, it's not really like these people report to me or anything like that. But there are times when I try to keep people focused on what IC Stars is about. And, everybody's different. Some people are detail oriented. Some people are big picture. Some people worry about things. Some people don't worry about things. So, it's a good group of people, and I have to try to find a way to make sure we're all on the same page and moving in the same direction.
And that is not as easy as it sounds. I don't think it actually sounds easy, but let's talk a minute about, training to prepare one to be a board member. Now, after a long experience in the corporate world, can you say that the successes you had as a leader in the for-profit world translated 100% into being a nonprofit leader, or was there some adjustments you had to make, sort of reorient your own brain a little bit?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
Yeah, good question. So I think a lot of what I did in the corporate world was useful. I mean, I was, by the time I got involved with IC Stars, I was already pretty high up in the organization. So, a lot of my work was dealing, getting things done through other people. I wasn't writing code anymore or anything like that. So, getting a group of people to agree on a direction to do the job that they needed to do, that was something I was pretty skilled at. So that was easy. That was similar to what happens on a board. What's very difficult on a board, it was difficult for me when I first started, and I see this in new board members too. They want to roll up their sleeves and be part of management. They want to go do the work. They want to make the decisions. And that's not our job. We are not the managers of the organization. We oversee the managers. And it's very difficult for some people to be able to say, oh, no, I'll get in there and I'll take care of it. That's not your job. You can't do that. You don't work for Sandy. Sandy can't tell you what to do. And so you gotta be careful of that. And that's difficult because everybody who comes onto a board, they're all successful people. They've all rolled up their sleeves and done hard work, and they see a problem or they see an opportunity and they want to jump in, and you can't. You really have to take a step back unless Sandy asks you to get involved, and then that's different. But generally speaking, you just can't do it. The other thing you have to keep in mind is you're the board member. When you call a staff member, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. I remember when I was working, if the member of our board called me, right? Board member would call me, I was the CIO, and he said, hey, Dave, I think the company ought to look at this technology. That was big stuff. So I'd have to go to my boss, who was the CEO, and I'd say, hey, Jim, Alan just called me and Alan wants us to look at this piece of technology. And it would be like all hands on deck. How are we going to answer Alan? We got to make sure we do this in the right way. So I as a board member, I have to be careful, that I don't just pick up the phone and call somebody on Sandy's staff and say, hey, did you look at this? I call Sandy, right? And I say, hey, Sandy, I saw something, maybe Elizabeth or somebody needs to take a look at this. I watch myself. I don't call the staff members directly because I want to be careful that I'm not shoving my weight around or unintentionally and causing people to get crazy.
So I think the interns can see a bit of the plate tectonics, as it were, of managing the nonprofit infrastructure. It's not exactly the same, as we've said before, as running a business. So if it was Dave Edelstein's pizzeria, it's your call, right? You decide the recipes. You can decide to swap out one oven for another. The marketing of the pizzeria, it's all on you, and it's yes sir, no sir, right? It's your company. But I think what we're seeing with the interplay of people and skills inside nonprofits, it's a more nuanced management situation. So yes, we still have a boss, but there's this thing called the board, which is a very big partner in the work. And it may be that the average person inside the nonprofit never meets David or other members of the board, or they might meet them. Depends. But the board is there, and it's sort of this, as I hope you're seeing, a very important component. It's sort of like a little bit of the iceberg underwater, I mean, when people see an organization such as IC Stars, they may see Sandy, all right, or other people from the organization that are spokespeople, and they may not know that this board is functioning like a submarine underwater, pursuing all this good work day after day with so many different piece parts to it. But as I hope you're beginning to see, a board is part of the magic of what sustains a nonprofit going forward into the future. Now, when that day comes, and may never come in my lifetime, but it could come one day that Sandy decides to leave Icy Stars. And maybe she's appointed as Secretary of Commerce. How about that? Now, how do we handle that, Dave? How do we handle transitions?
That is a very tough issue, and we struggle with that. We try hard to document everything that is Icy Stars, so that when we go to a new city, for example, here's the cookbook, here's how you do Icy Stars, and to a certain extent that works. But Sandy is the founder. She's a very special person, and we struggle with what would happen if Sandy decided she was done. She's reached whatever point in her life, and she doesn't want to do it anymore. I think that's a real issue. That's a real issue for every organization, especially when you're talking about the founder. I think about Syracuse University. We're on our 8th chancellor. So when our current chancellor decides he's ready to go, we have a good process. We'll find another chancellor. The university isn't going to go away.
Right.
But for Icy Stars, we talk about it. I don't have a good answer, because I don't think we have anybody right now that I could point to and say that's the next Sandy. And we need to think about that. What do we need the executive director of Icy Stars to do? We talk about it a lot.
So this is
and
we're letting the interns in on some insider baseball here.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
But no, that's critical, though. I appreciate it, because when you have a powerful founder of a nonprofit such as Sandy, this is a universal issue. Sometimes it's called the founder syndrome. I don't believe Icy Stars suffer from it, but I've seen many nonprofits with a very charismatic, powerful nonprofit founder who stayed too long, and things get stale, and things don't work right. And the board, in those cases, fails to exercise its oversight responsibilities. So it is an issue, but I mean, that's part of the magic and mystery of nonprofits. It would be Sandy's desire for Icy Stars to live long beyond her life, obviously.
Sure.
As many nonprofits do. So think about the Boy Scouts, or I don't know, the churches that people go to. All these institutions started a long, long time ago. Well, as did Syracuse University, as you just mentioned. And I think part of the ecosystems of nonprofits is we're relying on the board to take us into the future. That is, to me, is the mark of a very sound, astute, and tight and mature nonprofit that could suffer the loss of any number of its key leaders. And I'm not saying that's going to happen or should happen, but if Sandy should somehow want to leave, or her life takes her to another place, what she has created with you and your colleagues is something that will live on regardless.
Right. That's right.
That is a critical point in the life of nonprofits. So we're asking our interns to create their own nonprofits as part of this class. And in our final session on June 7th, each intern will present to us a sketch of their own nonprofit designed to solve some pressing social issue that is of concern to them, and located in a particular place, to name it, and to tell us 5 people in the world that they would like on their board, such as yourself. People who have those different qualities that would make their nonprofit successful. And in so thinking, you are taking the steps down this nonprofit life cycle journey. Because what happens is, at the beginning, the nonprofit is a club. It's almost a cult, if you want to think of it that way. Started by some charismatic person who has an itch in their belly, a stone in their shoe, to do something that nobody has done before or thinks is even necessary. And our nonprofit leaders start out kind of annoying and cloying and insistent and argumentative and passionate, making their case over and over and over again. If we could go back in time and see Sandy in 1997, 1998, I'm going to say she's probably told the story in different forms 200 times, right? To different people. What are you trying to do, Sandy? well, I'm trying to create this service organization to train people, and then she'll explain her point, right? She did that enough times in enough situations to achieve the critical mass and to start her organization those many years ago and recruit people like Dave to the board who helped build it and sustain it. And it moved in those days from the cult or club of Sandy to a bona fide organization with weight, history, gravitas, and resources. And that is what we see today with Icy Stars. Is there anything else you'd like to just mention, to our interns, who have this task before them about, forming boards and, the magic of nonprofits, Dave?
Well, there is one other thing, I guess. When I lived in Evanston, I got involved in the volunteer community in Evanston. And one thing I noticed was people, like you said, Tom, charismatic person would come in and say, I've got this great idea for a nonprofit. And, they articulate whatever that idea was. And I was there's a thing in Evanston called the Evanston Community Foundation. And the foundation would give money to different nonprofits. And one thing we would see is, that idea that you have, somebody else is already doing it. So why should we give money to you? And they try to say why their idea was better. And it was interesting to think about, should we encourage them to work with the established nonprofit, or should we encourage them to go off on their own? Because they're all going to be asking the same people for money. So if I'm a donor, who would I give my money to? The established nonprofit or the new one? So I think it's something, if you're going to come up with a nonprofit, you need to think about what makes you special. Why should it's not so different from starting your own business. Why should somebody buy your product? Why should somebody give money to your nonprofit? What's different about it? So with Icy Stars, there are other organizations that train people in IT. I could name 5 or 6 of them. The thing that we believe distinguishes Icy Stars is the leadership component. We believe that by teaching IT in the way we teach it, we prepare you to be community leaders and to be great at IT. And so that's the special differentiator about Icy Stars. So you got to think about, there's lots and lots of problems in our society, and government doesn't do everything. Government sometimes hurts things, and the for-profit world can't do everything because they want to make money. So there's a space for nonprofits, but what's special about what you're trying to do? There's lots of people thinking about solving the society's problems. What's special about yours? And I think you need to hone that message really sharply so that when you're making your pitch, people say, yep, I'm going to give money to you. I'm going to join your board.
That's an awesome distinction. And we have stressed that in our instructions. What's your special sauce, folks? Sometimes it's your location, that you're going to do something in a place where there's a desert of that thing that you want to offer. So do be mindful of where specifically you're going to cite your nonprofit and for whom you're going to do it. So again, sometimes the mission of the nonprofit is not unique in that regard, but except that it's going to be done for teenage women of color, in Englewood. And when you walk around Englewood, there's simply nothing like what you're talking about. So that gives you your special sauce. So that's what we're asking our interns to think about, for our next class. Let's open it up to the interns. Folks, so you have any questions for our special guest, please unmute and just fire away.
I guess I can shoot first. Oh,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Alex, is that you?
well, this was Michael. we see certain things organization. What are some of the of IC stars that the board is in different avenues?
I didn't catch the whole, you were breaking up a little bit. Can you say it again? I'm sorry.
What are some of the looking to expand IC stars and looking to be involved in?
Sure. So what are we, I think there are two areas that we're looking at now. One is, of course, expanding to other cities. So that's going to be an ongoing project. There are cities who are calling Sandy and saying, hey, we've heard about the great stuff you're doing. We want you to come here. So that's one area. The other area is we're taking a piece of the IC Stars curriculum and trying to package it in a way that we could sell it to corporations, especially around some of the teamwork, some of the project work that you do so well in the time that you're in IC Stars. Companies might be able to benefit from that. So that's another area that we're looking at. An area that I haven't spoken to Sandy about, but it's something that I've been thinking about is the recruiting that IC Stars does to end up with people like you. It's a really interesting process that I know you're familiar with because you went through it. And I've been always impressed by the interns that I meet. There's like, you've gone through this process and we end up with these really great people. So, I think about recruiting at educational institutions, at for-profit institutions. Is there something we can learn from the way IC Stars recruits and sell that? So just think, so we look at what IC Stars does as just its normal business, normal process, and say, could we package pieces of that and help other people and make some money on the side?
Awesome. Other question?
Yes, I have a question. David, how long have you been a member of IC Stars as a board director?
Well, so I've been on the board, I think, since 2005 or 2006. And then I became chair of the national board when we created it 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay. And also, let me ask you this. How many cities is IC Stars planning to expand, if you are allowed to say something? And we haven't heard that much about Columbus at all, sir. We've been hearing a lot about Milwaukee,
Right.
and also they're going to open a chapter in Kansas City, but nothing about Columbus.
Right. So I don't know how many cities we want to go to. We don't have a number. We don't even have a number that we'd like to do in a year. We just want to be ready to expand based on demand from other cities. So the first city we tried to expand to was Columbus, and we really weren't sure about what we were doing. And so we got it up and running, and we learned that Columbus is different than Chicago. We should have known that, right? It makes sense. And the way things work in Chicago, the way companies work in Chicago, what's interesting to companies in Chicago is different than Columbus. Columbus just has a different culture, a different way of looking at things. And we weren't really in tune with that. So we actually stopped our work in Columbus. We shut it down. We're now working with them again to see how we could restart Columbus. We think that what we've learned in Milwaukee has been very helpful. Milwaukee's doing well, which is good. And so we think that maybe maybe now we can go try Columbus again. So we're talking to them. And we've learned that Milwaukee is different. You know, for example, Tom, you said this earlier, the technology that we teach in Chicago is different than what the companies in Milwaukee want to use. So we have to think about how do we teach the technology that Milwaukee companies want to use. And so we're trying to figure out that. We also know that some of the fundraisers we do in Chicago don't work in Milwaukee. It's different, you know, different kind of culture, different way the corporations work. So we have to think about what are the fundraisers that work in Milwaukee. And we're doing that. So these are really good things to learn. So when we go to different cities, we know what to look for, and we need to think about that.
So and so we can see that the board here, in a way, is acting kind of like as a meta brain, if you will, or repository for this kind of institutional knowledge that might not be in the mind of one staff person. You know, it wouldn't be necessarily one staff person's job to know all these things that David is speaking about, unless you had, I suppose, a director of strategic planning or something like that, whose job was that kind of task. So the board is keeping in its collective brain these large questions about, you know, what would work in Milwaukee versus Houston, or let's look at this idea of recruiting. What exactly is happening when we're recruiting such a diverse and talented group of people? Let's step back and examine that with our meta brains and our experiences that we have from different domains. And that's a very creative and useful function that may not have ever been able to come out of one staff person's mind, except possibly Sandy's. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. Anything else you'd like to address before we move on?
No, I just want to thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to talk to everybody. I think this is really cool. And
Awesome.
I just want to say to everybody, I hope you're all staying healthy. And I think the world is going to start to get back to normal. And look forward to seeing you at Icy Stars one of these days.
Thank you, Dave. Big thumbs up from Cycle 48.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank
sir.
you.
All right. That was awesome sharing. I hope you got some real good insights to this kind of leadership, which is a very servant-driven kind of leadership. Remember, we talked about servant leadership, and that one of the most important things in this work is the desire to serve. And I think you can agree with me that Mr. Edelstein has this desire, this thirst to serve, to put his skills and talents and his brain into good use. And of course, reflecting his experiences in the world that he knows and where he worked. And he found, I think, a very good place. And Icy Stars is lucky to have him. Now, we're going to go into small groups. And we're going to spend the next little while talking about board members. So I'm going, in a few minutes, I'm going to put you into small groups. And it is, let's see, it's about 2:39. So we'll spend 10 minutes in small groups. And this is your task in the small group. You are going to be thinking about your board members. I'm going to put the link to the Zoom board in the chat. So we'll go back to using our Zoom boards. And what you're going to do is go to a page on this Zoom board and create a Post-it note. And on the Post-it note will show your name, the name of the organization that you wish to start. And if you have a working title, that's fine. Or it could be just be educational organization if you haven't gotten to a name yet. Where it's going to be. So give me your best thinking. A few bullet points about what it's going to do. It could be a sentence fragment. It could say, Tom's educational institution will be training teenage boys how to code and build apps. Could be just that sentence fragment. But really what I'm asking for now is 5 names of human beings that you would put on your board. Okay, So go to the link you'll find your page there with one example already set. And I will now break us into small groups. So I appreciate everyone taking the time to follow the exercise and put up their post-it notes. I'm glancing through them. I see you guys are right on the point. Thank you for being so responsive to the exercise. I will be reviewing those with great detail and interest. Now, as we reach the end of our third session, the spotlight will be shifting to you. So for our final session, which takes place on June 7th, where we skip a week, we won't meet next Monday. We want you to go to this place. That is the reminder for where your instructions are when you're taking your turn. Each intern will be given 5 or 6 minutes to take the microphone and walk us through your presentation. Please do upload your presentation to SlideShare. Make sure you set your sharing permissions to public so I can download a copy. Email me the URL, and then I'll get everything set up to make the presentations process go very smoothly when we meet in 2 weeks. Are there any questions or comments about anything? Is everyone okay with this? Are we good? Okay, excellent. What do you think of David? Awesome, no? Darryl is shaking his head. What do you got to say, Darryl?
I feel like he had some very informative information to give us, and we got a lot of insight about the board that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really unusual and special to get someone of his stature to kind of just dish with us, just share his background and just be open to kind of, like I said, insider baseball. And Icy Stars is a big deal and getting bigger. So you guys had access to some really good experience and knowledge. Someone wants to know if there's any way to get in touch with me. I put my email in the chat. I'm always available. I'm pretty much I live online. Well, okay, my good friends of Cycle 48. That was a little bit of an insight as to how nonprofits are sustained over time. The answer is it's not just selling products. You are doing something on an ongoing basis. Sometimes money exchange is involved, but oftentimes there is no money involved in the product being offered. And so it takes a lot of love to keep a nonprofit going. I think you get that. All right, my friends, we'll see each other in 2 weeks. You'll get your newsletter in about 2 weeks to remind you. The website will be updated with today's video in a few days. And in the meantime, everyone have a great Memorial Day weekend and stay safe.